Before we start this episode, I wanted to tell you that if you're looking for free dog training courses, you can take the Victoria Stilwell Academy's most popular free course, Building Your Dog's Confidence, right now by going to vsdogtrainingacademy.com. That's vsdogtrainingacademy.com. Okay, now on with the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. I have a very special guest today. I've been wanting to speak to this man for years, and our ships kind of keep passing in the night. His name is Dr. Daniel Allen. He is an animal geographer, a lecturer at Keele University. He's an animal campaigner and founder of Pet Theft Reform. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel.
Thank you, Victoria. It's great to finally meet in person or virtually. Yeah.
Yes, it truly is. And I have been wanting to talk to you for a long time because, you know, you are deep in the thick of all of this. And of course, you are UK based. But for any listeners that don't live in the UK, I think the information that you're going to get today is really vital and something that you can use when you are in your own municipality, in your own country, in your own town, your own city. So, listen on, because we've got a lot of great tips as well for you if your pets get lost or stolen. You, first of all, before we start, what does an animal geographer do?
That's a very good question. Yeah, an animal geographer, basically I'm interested in the cultural significance of animals and also the lived experience that animal welfare is really important to me. A lot of the research I've been doing recently has been looking at dog theft in particular, looking at in terms of data from police forces, also the experience of those who've had their dogs stolen or abducted.
Right. Okay. So this is truly right up your alley. And when did you start? When did you start getting involved with pet theft reform? Why? What was happening in the country?
Okay. So at the time, it was probably about 2017. I've been doing campaigning, animal advocacy work previous to that as a volunteer. I know the work of Vets Get Scanning and Missing and Stolen Pets Alliance, SAMPA. They've been doing loads of important work about pet theft for years. And basically it was on social media. I was getting more and more posts to me, stolen dogs, stolen cats, asking to share them basically on social media. And so I was sharing them. And what I started to think was, wow, there's a lot of dogs which are being stolen here. This is something I'd really thought about before. And alongside that, I had my first dog, Rupert. So him and Louise were part of my family. He was my first dog, and I had a really amazing, strong bond with him. Sadly, he passed away recently, a few months back. But the thought of somebody taking him from us was just devastating, just the mere thought of it. So having seen these posters, having tried to help people on the ground and get the information out there to make dogs too hot to handle, I just thought we need to do something bigger. We need to do something which is changing the law, basically, and changing the way in which we see pets more generally. So I teamed up with SAMPA. That was 2017. The Pet Theft Reform campaign started 2018. And we just got organised, basically. We thought we'd do a government petition. We're going to work together. We're going to try and bring as many organisations and celebrities and public and politicians together. And ever since then, we've been campaigning on this issue.
Now, you did. You have brought a lot of people together, and I may be showing my age, but of course, one of the people that is very active in this whole arena is Debbie Matthews. She's the daughter of the wonderful Bruce Forsyth, the late great Bruce Forsyth, who, if you live in the UK and everybody loved him. I mean, from Strictly to the Generation Game to everything. I remember as a child watching the Generation Game. I watched it with my family. It was my favorite thing. I don't know if you're as old as I am, but it was like one of the favorite things. It was like a family viewing, and he was brilliant.
Yeah, amazing household name, an icon, basically, a legend in terms of TV and celebrity in the UK. And Debbie's amazing. She, in terms of animal advocacy, animal campaigning, you say, known her for some time. It was 2006 when her dogs were stolen. And she's been campaigning, voluntarily in her own time ever since then. And it's really kind of inspiring. And that's one of the things that I'm really happy about, is that we've managed to join forces, work on this together, and, put our different skill sets together. It seems to be having an impact. And I think that's really important.
I met Debbie in 2006 when we were filming It's Me or the Dog. And actually, she'd applied to be on the show because this was just after her dogs had been stolen. Widget and Gizmo, 2 Yorkshire Terriers. And fortunately, because of Bruce Forsyth, they were able to get on television, on the morning shows, very, very quickly and get her message out there that her dogs had been stolen and they were found. And the reason why I come in is because after their trauma, they were very traumatized. And after what they had been through, they were having a really difficult time. They were a lot more reactive, a lot less able to settle. And so she called me in and I worked with Debbie and Richard, her husband, with the wonderful, Bridget and Gizmo, who are no longer with us, sadly. But they made great progress. And of course, Debbie and Richard were just, wonderful animal caregivers. They really helped them. And Bruce Forsyth did do a tap dance on It's Me or the Dog. I just want to say that. He did. And so it really was an honor to work with her. But of course, then I started working with her on Vets Get Scanning. And at that time, microchipping wasn't mandatory. So we were trying to, get microchipping to be mandatory, but also for vets to scan, because there's no point in having, you can microchip your dog, but if your vet's not going to scan it, or if a rescue organization doesn't have a scanner, then you can't find out where this dog's from. How has that, I had her on the show, I had her on this podcast years and years ago talking about that. Yeah, now mandatory microchipping has been introduced into the UK.
Yeah, that's it. In terms of the progress there, so 2006, when you knew each other initially, 2016 is when compulsory microchipping came in England and Wales. But still today, it's only optional to scan. There's lots of very positive noise at the moment because cats are being added to being compulsory chipped too. But again, it's the same databases, it's lots of databases, the same issues within the actual system, whereby, people have to make sure they keep details up to date. People have to make sure that professionals need to make sure they do actually scan dogs, and it's not necessarily happening. So what can happen and what is happening is that dogs that are stolen, dogs that are missing, may just fall through the gaps. I suppose they might end up going missing, being taken by somebody, which is theft by finding, being kept. They might be loved and looked after, fantastic. But obviously they've stolen them inadvertently, take them to the vets, get them registered, yet they don't have to be scanned. So if they were scanned, that would be picked up straight away, and the family who are searching would get that reunited so much sooner. And there's been various examples of this, and it's just something where, in theory, microchipping is fantastic. It is a really amazing way of getting the individual identity of the animal, knowing who the keepers are, and obviously helping reunite. But at the moment, there's so many issues within it. Some of the database companies are very good. Some of them aren't very good. So in terms of, making sure that we change the veterinary system, I suppose, with this, what we need to do is get the centralized database in place, which will speed up the whole process, make it more efficient for the authorities. And then it's more likely that scanning can happen on a more regular occurrence. So it's quite a long, convoluted way of doing things. And all the campaign that's happened for decades now has made a really strong impact. And I think there will be changes happening in the next sort of few years. There is a positive reception from the government on this. There's been progress, but there's still quite a lot of work to be done.
Well, I don't understand why it's taking so long, to be quite honest. I don't understand why it's taking the government so long to be able to do this. Surely it's a relatively simple thing, isn't it, to have mandatory scanning as well?
Yeah, that's the thing. It is relatively simple. It's something whereby it's going to benefit the animals. That's the key thing. It's going to benefit the families as well. So, there's various things which are being said. And one of the big issues is the fact that there's so much inconsistency between the 22 databases that exist. The other problem is that there are 22 databases. When this first started in 2016, I think there were a handful. And they keep growing and growing and growing. So there's almost this potluck in terms of which database you're with, which veterinary practice you go that a stolen or missing pet might go to, or if it's a warden or if it's a rescue, whatever. So there's lots of different things that have to fall into place for a missing or stolen dog to actually be scanned, then to be reunited. And that's one of the loopholes we want to close. It's something which Debbie's been trying to do for decades. It's something which Pet Theft Reform are looking at as well, in terms of working with Debbie and helping, ensure that the government are listening to this, because it's just a relatively easy thing to do. The public would want it. Anybody who's got a dog would want it. The other kind of problematic thing is microchipping. It's not exciting. It's not, you look, lots of different campaigns do very well because of the animals which are involved within it. If you focus solely on microchipping, it's very difficult to get the public to listen, because they just think, I microchip my dog, that's it. It's not going to happen to me. My dog won't go missing. It won't be stolen. Whereas we're now looking at it through a dog theft lens. So if your dog does get stolen and your dog is microchipped and your data is up to date, fantastic. But you might end up going to a veterinary practice or another authority that doesn't scan, which means that dog may end up staying with another family or somewhere else and might be sold on. So there's these things we need to quite simply close and correct.
How big is the pet theft problem in the UK right now?
It's been growing for years. It's something which has always been, dogs have always been stolen. So that's one thing, just to, we look back to the Victorian times, there's examples of dog napping in London, which was more about stealing dogs for money from high status families. So they'd get a ransom, basically. That still happens today, but there's all various different reasons why people steal dogs. The key reason is money, it's profit. It's low risk, high reward. So it's something whereby if they get caught, which is highly unlikely, you've probably got a 99% chance of getting away with this. This is based on data, so it's evidence-based. And then if you do actually get caught, you might get a small fine, maybe a suspended sentence. And if you think about how much money is involved in dogs, if you're selling pups, look back to the pandemic, when all the prices, exploded basically. There was enormous demand for canine companionship. And that led to an increase in dog theft as well. The costs are coming down, but, stealing dogs isn't just about taking them to puppy farms to breed. It's not about just selling them on for order. It's not about necessarily just, getting a ransom or a reward back. Sometimes there's other things which are happening. So, and I think that ransom aspect is something where people may be more likely to pay that money for a stolen dog than other ways in which money can be made. So there's lots of different things happening. There's different types of people involved. There's organised crime, but also opportunists. So I think to be realistic, it's a low volume crime in the UK. We're looking around 2,500, 3,000 in terms of police data. We know that's the lowest number per year because the police data is inconsistent and incomplete. Yet for every single family that is torn apart through dog theft, it has a massive impact on them. It's traumatic. And as you mentioned in terms of Gizmo and Widget, people often think they forget about the experience of the dog, the welfare of the dog, that's something which is generally not even considered. It's not considered by law. A stolen pet in the UK and England and Wales is really seen as property. They're seen as chattel. So their sentience, their emotional bond to the fact that they're family members isn't taken into account.
Which in this day and age is extraordinary to me. Extraordinary. I really, it does take education. And of course, as you know, that the science, animal behavior science and cognitive science. I mean, it's taken a long time to ramp up, especially where pets are concerned, dogs and cats. The study of dogs or how dogs think and feel and learn really in the last 20 years has become so much more popular. And now almost, am I right in saying this, almost half of all households in the UK have a pet of some kind? And
yes,
so
it's
wouldn't you think that would be important, that, these are now family members, whether you like it or not? You can call it an animal, you can call it a dog or a cat, but we now know so much about not just their experience, about their emotional experience too. Are we just, putting this dog like the same level as a laptop?
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. It's something, a Labrador is a laptop, is a mobile phone, is a plant pot. And that's just ridiculous. That we've got a law which is from 1968. It's you talked about all the science that's come through, which there's been so many advances, as you know, and as you say. And it's something whereby the law needs to catch up with our lived experiences, the way in which we do actually value our pets. And we do see them as family. They're not just property. Obviously, they are bought, so there is the monetary element. But in terms of sentencing, for example, if you are to be caught and you go to court and you get a sentence, at the moment what's happening, if a dog's worth under £500, or, a senior dog, perhaps, say a senior dog, a rescue dog, you might get into a category 4 sentence for theft, which means you might get a very small fine, maybe suspended. But if it's just for stealing a dog, nothing else, not adding any aggravating factors, just simply stealing a dog, which I say simply, it's a horrible thing. In my eyes, it's a very serious crime. So that's category 4. If you've got a dog which is over £500, so pedigree or just most dogs these days, it means that you're going to category 3. So there's always a differentiation where category 3 you can get a higher sentence. So we say that's wrong. That the monetary value aspect when it comes to abducting a dog shouldn't be taken into account. What should be taken into account is the fact that family members and they're sentient beings, and we have that strong emotional bond. And the other thing which is kind of not really thought about that much is the fact that it has such an impact on people and on pets. And that's, again, something that needs to be taken into consideration with the change of the law.
What about the Kept Animals Bill?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, okay, so the Kept Animals Bill is like a Christmas tree animal welfare bill, and it had lots of different issues within it. And it was really a nice piece of legislation. So it had things like primates as pets, it had things about zoos, it has about cropping ears of dogs and so forth. It had about importation of puppies, pet abduction, and livestock rearing and various other things. So lots of very important things which don't fit together, but it was all thrown into one bill. 2 years ago, that this bill emerged, I suppose going backwards again from the pet theft reform campaigning, the campaigning that we were doing helped create the Pet Theft Task Force. So that created, I think that was 2021, I think. And basically they had lots of independent people, including myself, providing research, and coming up with recommendations. And this included people like DEFRA and the Ministry of Justice, the Sentencing Council, and various other charities and stuff as well. And basically they recommended having a pet abduction offence, which would probably fit in the animal welfare legislation. So after that recommendation, that happened. The pet abduction, the taking of dogs, what it was initially, was put within the Kept Animals Bill. And we were all kind of quite pleased with that. All the other campaigns were pleased too. Lots of campaigning there, lots of kind of voluntary campaigning. It really sort of made a difference and had an impact in law. But what happened was in the UK, we've had various prime ministers in quick succession over a number of years. I think we had 3 in 1 year very recently. And yeah, it's government changes, cabinet changes, everything has to start again. That happened. Alongside that, what was happening was we got to about 2 years, the bill hadn't moved on. The government was promising it was going to become law. And then by May 2023, they said, well, actually, no, we're not going to go forward with it. We're going to take everything through as an individual measure through a single private members' bill, I suppose, supported by the government. And they still said they're committed to that. So that's very positive. It's not quite what we wanted, but it's something we need to take the positive from this and say, okay, great, we'll work with that and see what we can do. But I think one of the reasons it got abandoned was due to politics. Politics is important here, but it's also slow. It's also going to be a lot of, things happening.
Say no more.
And I think the key thing with this, there was lots of talk surrounding fox hunting, which is illegal in the UK, but it's something whereby dogs being off the lead and so forth. It was basically leading to challenges and revisions to be put within it, which I think would have taken too long. It wouldn't have got through anyway. It would have lots of embarrassment in terms of political ideas and so forth. And it just ended up not happening for those reasons. But the government say they are still committed. And one of the reasons we've really sort of made a lot of noise about pet theft reform again is to say, well, please don't forget this offence. This offence was recommended by the Pet Theft Task Force, which is a government-led task force. It was put within the Kept Animals Bill, and if a number of offences are going to be taken from that bill, pet abduction should be one of them. So we're just making sure that that's not forgotten.
How do you just keep sane in all of this? You have to be really patient to be a campaigner.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's about teamwork. I think that's the key thing. It's about positive campaigning as well. It's something where it is frustrating, it's tiring, it's not necessarily that rewarding at times. But you have to sort of look at the end goal. What's the end game? Mark Abraham, I think you know Mark Abraham, the vet.
Yes.
He's given me loads of advice, loads of support on this, and following in the success of Lucy's Law. Campaigning royalty, basically, Mark. So, the way he's done it very much has informed the way in which pet theft reform presents itself as well. It's about making sure you do collaborate with people. It is making sure that you do thank the people that have been helping along the way. It's about talking to politicians, even if it doesn't matter about what party they're from. It should be cross-party. So anybody from any party I'm happy to talk to about, and, if they're happy to support this, that's fantastic. And I think that's the key thing. It's just about thinking about that end goal. What's the key thing we're trying to do? So the end goal is getting the laws changed. But alongside that, the positives are every time we talk about pet theft reform, it means that a stolen dog and their family is potentially going to be in the news. So what we've found in the last few weeks, I've been talking to the media a lot, and it's fantastic that another platform is provided for individuals that are really struggling to get that bigger national platform. So that in itself, again, is a positive. So every time I speak to a journalist, I sort of say, well, here are a number of long-time lost and stolen dogs. These are the families. This is Dog Lost. They're fantastic. Chat to them about more recent cases and all those sorts of things. It's about sharing the love, basically. It's just saying all these people do amazing stuff. All these people need support. And I think it's providing that hope, I suppose, as well, because we are seeing that dogs that have been stolen years ago are getting reunited. And that can only happen by raising awareness and ensuring that dog theft remains in the media. We found in the past year, dog theft's hardly been spoken about by the media, whereas during lockdown, it was the big topic. Everybody was talking about it. It led to all these different things happening. But until probably a few weeks back, where a little dog called Twiglet was stolen. I don't know if you've seen this on social media. The video is heartbreaking. Basically, you got this little sausage dog, which is
terrible.
Yeah, this person's come in the house, masked up, taking this dog, and listen to the sound of this poor dog Twiglet. Doesn't want to leave the house. Doesn't want to go with this person. And that video was shared by the Essex Police, and the family involved talked to the media. And very soon after, the dog was reunited. And that wouldn't have happened, I don't think, without firstly the video footage, and people could really see this is something which is horrible. It's traumatic for that dog, and that's just being taken away, And what that did, that has led to more people starting to think, well, actually, yes, this is horrible. It's not just, oh, your dog's been taken, disappeared, they're lost. This is something which can be really troubling and traumatic for the dogs themselves. But also, by working together, using social media, going on the national newspapers, going on television, those sorts of things help. They really do help bring families back together. And I think that's the key thing. I think it's making sure that you don't give up for those reasons. It's not just about the law change. We know the law changing by itself isn't enough to stop dogs from being stolen. That will never happen. That's not how law works, But we know if there is a larger punishment, there's a bigger chance of being caught. That's probably the most important thing. It's more likely that less dogs will be stolen. If it's not a low risk, high reward crime, other crimes are. So that, in terms of those organised crime and criminality, they've moved potentially to other things. But it's also just showing the kind of the lived elements. Anybody watching that video, Twiglet, listening to that, it's even
terrible.
The most hardened criminal would go, ooh.
Right, exactly. So don't tell me that, animals aren't sentient beings. Animals aren't going to feel pain or fear. And then, of course, having to deal with the trauma afterwards, as I've experienced with Widget and Gizmo, with Debbie Matthews. I mean, that is hysterical. I mean, this lasts for the rest of the dog's life. If the dog is lucky to be reunited with its owner, they're going to see definite changes. It would be like anything. It would be like a child being abducted. right? It's traumatic. And eventually, if they come home, if they're lucky enough to come home, then they're going to suffer with that trauma for the rest of their life. Dogs are no different. I'm speaking with Dr. Daniel Allen, and we're going to take a short break. But after we come back from this break, I want to talk a little bit about what you can do to protect your pets.
Are you a dog trainer looking to take your knowledge and skills to the highest level? Or maybe you're a dog guardian, interested in figuring out whether your love of dogs can translate into more of a career than a hobby. Or are you already working in the pet industry, but recognize that you need to fill some gaps when it comes to how to manage dog behavior so that you can better serve your existing clients? No matter where you are on your journey, the Victoria Stilwell Academy has courses that can help you get to where you want to go. From our free Building Your Dog's Confidence starter course, to the powerful Fundamentals of Dog Training and Behavior course, all the way up to our flagship Professional Dog Trainer course, we have options for every skill level and budget. All you have to do is be passionate about giving dogs the best lives possible. All of our courses are available online anywhere around the world 24/7. No gimmicky sales tactics where you need to act within a certain window to enroll. My amazing team at the Victoria Stilwell Academy understands that we need to be ready to serve you whenever the time is right for you to make the jump. Whether that means dipping your toes into our free courses or realizing your fullest professional dog training dream by enrolling in the dog trainer course. So, join the thousands of dog geeks like you that are a part of our amazing and supportive VSA family today. We have Academy specialists available to talk with you and figure out how we can help you reach your dog training goals, or you can enroll in a starter course for free right now. The Victoria Stilwell Academy. It's the future of dog training.
We're back with Dr. Daniel Allen, and okay, what can we do to protect our pets? Doesn't matter where you live. This isn't just UK based. Do you have some tips about how, because we're all scared like anything now, do you have any tips for us?
Yeah, I think the key thing is just make sure that you don't leave your dogs unattended, and also assume that it could happen to you. I think it's important not to be scared. It's important to take into account, in terms of the numbers involved, it is, a low volume of these cases happen. However, there are certain things that you can do which would make it more likely that your dog might get stolen. So, for example, don't leave your dog unattended in the garden. Make sure you can see what they're doing. Don't leave your dog unattended outside a shop, in a car, all those sorts of things. In a house, make sure your house is secure. Make sure your garden is secure. If you're going out for a walk, recall is really important if they're off their lead. If not, they may go missing. They may be found. They may be picked up, taken, kept, sold on, whatever. If you're going out for a walk, change your routes. Don't do the same routes every day at the same time, because people, if they are searching and targeting individuals, could say, okay, we're going to get this dog at that time on that day. Other things in terms of making sure your microchip's up to date, make sure that's done. Make sure you have the collar if that's required by law also. And make sure you have photos of your dogs, if they've got any characteristics which makes them individuals. They might have a heart shape on their chest, or they might have a bit of a ragged ear or something. Keep those things as well, just in case your dog does go missing or does get stolen. And I think that's the other thing. It's more likely your dog will go missing and get lost. But one thing which is often, again, not necessarily spoken about is the fact that when they are lost, they can get stolen. Because if they get found, I suppose back in the old days, you think, I found a dog, I was out in the woods and I kept it because he was cute. That's theft. It's something which you might be able to give them a home. But in the UK in particular, there's not very many stray dogs. So if you find a dog which appears to be stray in the UK, it's either been abandoned by somebody because it's no longer of value. So we found Fern, for example, a dog which had gone missing, had been stolen, ended up in a puppy farm for 3 or 4 years, was found abandoned, scanned at veterinary practice, found that it was Fern. This obviously informed Fern's law. They reunited, and Jodie got Fern back, and the family are really, Fern's doing well, but has changed. As you would expect, a dog that has been in a puppy farm and had a number of litters, because we see the scars, it's going to have an impact on them, especially if they've been taken from their loving home. So I think there's lots of things to do. The main thing is to be vigilant and just always assume that there's the possibility that somebody's watching and may want to take the dog from you, and that they're worth everything. So to somebody who steals them, they're worth in terms of breeding, they're worth in terms of other things, but they might be worth money in terms of ransoms or claiming a reward and those sorts of things. So I think that's the key thing. Just make sure you do, keep them close and just be pet theft aware.
Here in the US, especially in the suburbs, there are electric fences. And in fact, a lot of real estate here in the US, especially if you're living in a subdivision, something like that, there aren't fences. You're not allowed to have fences. You might be able to have a fence in your back garden, maybe. But so a lot of people have invisible fences, which of shock is, that's another thing. That's another campaign that we're working on right now. Yeah. But whether you agree with shock collars or not, I don't agree with shock collars. I also don't agree with invisible fences, because what happens is that in my neighborhood, especially where there are a lot of invisible fences, because people don't want to put fences around their properties. And here real estate is, there's more land, there's more land between houses. So it is hard and very expensive to put a fence around your entire land. However, what's happening is that dogs aren't just running through the fence if they see a bicycle or a kid they want to chase, or, an animal running on the other side of the fence. And then they get that shock and then they don't want to come back. So then they start wandering and then they get lost. And then we have posts on next door all the time of like, dog lost, wearing a collar, its name is this. And sometimes they get these dogs back and sometimes they don't. Obviously, the invisible fences don't stop people from coming onto the property either. And that is why dogs are getting stolen. And here down in the South, where there's a lot of puppy mills and there's also a lot of dog fighting, your dog may be stolen for ransom. It may be stolen, especially if it's a pedigree dog and it's an entire pedigree dog. It's going to be stolen and probably used for breeding, so puppies can be sold. But also, unfortunately, sometimes dogs are stolen as bait to be used as bait for fighting dogs. And however horrific this sounds, this is what's happening. So it doesn't matter where you live, you have to be vigilant. And in my family, we've had 2 cases of dogs getting lost or being stolen. And one was my dear late mother's dog in the 1950s. They had this beloved Staffordshire Bull Terrier called Velvet, and Velvet went everywhere with them. Velvet was their just Velcro dog. And at that time, really in the 1950s, I guess there weren't a lot of laws. You didn't have to have a lead, but Velvet didn't need a lead. Velvet was always with her people. And my mum and my grandmother went into a shop, and like so many dogs did then, they just sit outside and wait. They came out of the shop, Velvet was gone, and they never saw Velvet again. This devastated my mother, my grandmother so much that even before my mum passed away, she thought of Velvet. And so, that's never left her from the 1950s. So she was just very young, like a late teens to her early 80s, she's still thinking of Velvet. So that's the emotional impact that it has on people too. We never knew what happened to that poor dog. But also very recently, where social media, I've seen that the power of social media is my cousin's dog out on a walk, typical sort of spaniel, spied something and ran. Was normally great at recall, but this one time just ran off. Something, a smell, and she started searching for the dog, couldn't find the dog anywhere. Massive search parties, putting out on social media. Jane Fallon, who's wonderful, Ricky Gervais's wife, who's wonderful, put it out on her Twitter. I put it out on all my social media platforms to try and find this dog. Fortunately, the dog was found, but unfortunately it had been hit by a train. So in that respect, that was just a terrible accident. I mean, this dog was much older. It had never run off before. And they're animals at the end of the day. So just the devastation that my mum went through, my cousin went through. It's just, and two different situations, whether the dog is lost and runs away, or the dog is stolen, is incredibly traumatic. So that's why the work you're doing is so vitally important. And you say 2,000 to 3,000, what we know, animals being stolen a year. That might be sort of a smaller number for, I don't feel like it is. I see that 2,000 to 3,000, like you said, as 2,000 to 3,000 families and their extended families are going to be traumatized forever.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's just horrible. It's as you mentioned about your family's experience and your experience. It's just something which you're not going to forget. It's something that's always going to live with you, and I think that's important. That's something which should be recognised in relation to the crime, and it's just, and again, it just shows the strength of the bond, doesn't it? I think, and any form of loss, it's we all deal with things differently, but it's going to have a massive impact on you for different periods, and then, as I say, it's always going to be there. But I think when they do go missing, like you mentioned, like the staffy, it's the not knowing, isn't it? That's the thing which is the most difficult. And I think, having spoken to a lot of families that are still searching, and those that have searched and been reunited, that's the thing which tears away at people. It's the not knowing. It's the lack of closure. So it's something whereby that's why you have to keep looking. You have to keep searching constantly, because there is always the chance that you may find them. And dogs do get reunited after many years. It's something, again, thinking about this in a positive way. There are ways in which dogs are found due to various things, such as scanning, such as microchips and so forth. And I think, you mentioned in terms of the way in which in America it's different with the lack of fencing and stuff. I think one thing which is becoming increasingly important, and you mentioned social media too, is the use of technologies that can help us make sure that the dogs are not unattended. So, in terms of the houses, the doorbells and the stuff inside the house, they're not necessarily that expensive, or not as expensive as they used to be. Things like the trackers which you put on the collar. It's not going to stop dog theft, but it's something which is definitely going to help you find a missing dog. So there's lots of things which are there, which are beneficial now in terms of helping to track, helping to reunite. These things won't stop dogs from being stolen, but they will help reuniting. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, if you've got cameras on your front door, your back door, you've got cameras inside. I mean, I always say to have a webcam on your dog anyway. You can see what your dog is doing, and I just think that's important. Whether you've got old dogs or puppies, or I do. I think it's important to see what your dog does whilst you're not there, but to have as many cameras as you can. My next question is, let's say the ultimate horror happens and your dog is stolen. What do you do? First 24 hours, what do you do?
Phone the police. It's the first thing. So if you saw the dog being stolen, if you're in the UK, it's 999. If you didn't see the dog being stolen, they may have gone missing, it'd be 101. In the States, obviously, I think it'd be the same thing in terms of call the police.
911 in the United States, 301 in certain, definitely here where I live in Atlanta is 301. I think other states and other cities might have different numbers, but it's 911 for police and 301 if it's not an emergency, you think your dog is lost.
And the next step will be organisations such as Dog Lost in the UK. Fantastic. They're a free service whereby you basically register all your details about the dog, photograph, and it allows you to form a poster, a creative poster, which you can put online. You can print them out. Go on social media, start sharing that. Make sure you get in touch with your microchip company. Make sure you get in touch with your local vets. Let me think, what else? Social media and leafleting is really important. There's other organisations to also help, but I think there's lots of voluntary ones out there who do amazing work. Dog Lost are fantastic.
Yeah. And sorry, I should have said it's 311, not 301, 311 for people here. But so what happened with my cousin is that, she did all that, and then she had a lot of people call her almost because there was money on offer. She's so desperate to get this dog back, and she had many people calling her, and some of those calls were just fake.
Yeah, this is one of the major downfalls with this is you get your information out there because you're relying on goodwill of the public, strangers basically, and the pet theft reform relies on the kindness of strangers, but we know not everybody is necessarily that kind. So what we found in the UK, and it's something which the police they've started to take this more seriously. There's been a few cases recently which have gone to court and led to sentencing. People who haven't even got a dog, they haven't even stolen a dog, are phoning these phone numbers to scam the families, saying, "Give me £1,000, give me £5,000." So it's something where, in terms of a scam in itself, it is something which happens. There are kids that are just phoning numbers and just betting, daring each other to do it and stuff. But I think it's something which dog loss have thought about, and they've changed the way in which the phone numbers are used. So it is something where there might be a more centralised number as opposed to a family number, so they can kind of be filtered out. So those kind of scam or spam phone calls aren't there. But I think it's something obviously to be aware of. If that does happen, you obviously then make sure the authorities know, because then you've got something else happening. You've got potential extortion taking place, so you've got another crime happening. So I think that's something where you have to it's something to be ready for if that happens. As I say, people like Dog Lost now have changed the way in which they do things. So I think they've got more of a centralised access number as opposed to the family's phone number, because, a lot of families have said, when I've interviewed them for my research and stuff, that they get phone calls from all manner of different people at different times. But equally, people do get calls where they get, their dog has been seen and they do get reunited. So I think the key thing is just making sure they're out there, making sure those posters are visible, making sure that the dog has an online presence and they have like a local presence. Dogs which are stolen don't necessarily stay in the local area. They could end up in the UK. They might start off down in Kent and might end up in Scotland, for example. Similar things probably happen in the States, depending on why dogs have been stolen and which kind of wider criminal practices they're connected to.
One of the things that we're doing here in Georgia is, because I work with almost like a government organization, especially when it comes to animal welfare. And one of the things that we have here is we have a lot of people that sell puppies at flea markets. So it's very, very difficult here to get something like Lucy's Law, especially in this state. But what we are getting close to is getting to a point where we can make it illegal to sell puppies at things like flea markets, at a grocery store parking lot, things like that, and which happens a lot. And by doing that, a lot of pets that are stolen are sold in this way. So it's one of the ways here in the States that we're doing it. And I mean, I love people sharing on social media. When we post this podcast, we also love to have your ideas. You can go to positively.com/podcast or podcast@positive.com, and you can share your story as well. And you can also share it on Facebook and on Twitter as well. Please do contact me and let me know about your stories. I think it's really important to highlight. And I do think that everybody working together does take a village. And it also takes, people like you, Daniel, that you're sort of that linchpin for everything, and you are dogged determination. I mean, you don't stop battling, and I see your interviews, and that you're always posting on social media, and that you do a lot of work down with the government. And so here now you've got these three things for the pet theft reform: to make it a specific offense, to have a centralized database, and to make chips count. Have I got that right?
That's right, yeah. The specific offence is important. So we want this to be seen as pet abduction. It's not simply pet theft. It's not something whereby pets are just property. They are families. So pet abduction is what we want. We want it to be part of the Animal Welfare Act, so that sentience is recognised. The wording which was in the Act previously mentioned in terms of the emotional connection of families and so forth, so that's very positive. In terms of the centralised database, that's to try and encourage all professionals to be able to scan more often. So at the moment, the way in which the microchipping system works in the UK, it's very slow. And potluck, as I say, is something where you have to be it's just purely by chance, I suppose, depending on where the dog ends up and which database they're on and this, that and the other. I mean, the final thing in terms of making chips count is bringing it all together. It's saying, look, if you've got a microchip, make sure your details are up to date. So make sure your address is correct, your phone number is correct. If you moved house, that has to change as well. That's not something which veterinary practices do. It's the personal responsibility of the keeper in the UK anyway. So that's something whereby if you're moving house, changing mobile number, get in touch with your microchip company and make sure that's amended. And yeah, it's about, it goes back to Debbie as well in terms of Debbie Matthews and Vets Get Scanning. It's making sure that authorities, not just vets, all manner of authorities do scan. So that's, that's really important. I think if it's compulsory to microchip something, yeah, it's only optional to scan it. That doesn't make sense to me. That's just
doesn't make sense.
So
No,
I think there needs to be something, and it doesn't mean scanning every single time that the same dog goes to the vets or whatever. It could just be, an annual scan or something, just to make sure it does happen. But it is something in terms of making chips count. It's about making the whole microchipping system work better, making it effective. At the moment, it can be effective, but there's too many opportunities for it to be ineffective. So I think that's what it's all about. And again, using pet theft, and it's dogs and cats, because cats are going to have to be compulsory microchipped as well next year in the UK. Is using that as an entrance point to make microchipping better, because I think by connecting the two, it then means more, I think. So if you're just talking about microchipping by itself, it's difficult to sort of think, well, it won't happen to me, it's fine. It's just a tick box exercise. Well, it's not. It's something which is really, really important. If your dog goes missing, it will help reunite if the system's working correctly. So that's the three parts. And I think anybody in the UK, if you can obviously support the petition we have to make pet abduction a specific criminal offence. This is the 5th pet theft reform petition. We've had 3 were in my name, all over 100,000 signatures. We had a 4th one by Hannah, which got over 300,000 signatures. That was around lockdown years. And now we've got this hopefully the final one, just to remind the government that it's just something that has to be done by the end of this year, hopefully. And that's currently around sort of 25,000 or so. So we're trying to get to 100,000 again, just to sort of say, look, this is still important to the public. Admittedly, it's hard to make people sign again, having thought the law actually changed.
Yep.
Some people have signed a number of times, over those years since 2018. So it's very challenging to get people to re-engage with it. But it is something where people are starting to sort of look at this and go, yeah, we still need this. We still support this. So yeah, anybody who's listening and hasn't signed yet, do just look for Pet Abduction petition and you'll find it online.
You'll find it online. Okay, it's open until December the 28th, 2023. Is that right? They have up until then.
Yeah.
Okay, so get signing. You do have to be a British citizen, though, to sign.
You do, yeah.
Yes, you do. But please tell your friends, if you're listening to this podcast, after you finish listening to this podcast, I want you to put it on social media, get the link, find it, put it on social media, and tell everybody that you know, the animal loving community and beyond, because this affects everybody, to sign this petition, because we need this pet theft reform. We need it to pass, and we need to make pet theft a specific offence. We need to have a centralised database, and we need to make chips count. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. Look, guys, if you have a toddler, right, you're not going to leave it in your front garden or your front yard or your back garden or backyard just to run around by itself. You're not going to leave it outside a shop. You're not going to leave it in your car. You're going to make sure that that toddler is protected wherever it goes. You're also going to make sure that you don't leave the toddler by itself when you go out. Of course, we can leave dogs, but much better to have a camera for dogs as well, so that you can take a look and see what your dog is doing during the day when you're not there, which is actually really important as well, so that if your dog has any kind of specific behavior issues, even if they don't, you can kind of see what the dog does, which I think is always fascinating when you're not there. So these tips, I really hope that you have learned a lot of information. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. And I really, first of all, I congratulate you. Thank you for all your hard work. And I just want to say best of luck. I'm a huge supporter, and I will, keep asking people to sign.
Thank you ever so much for having me on the show. And also thank you ever so much for your ongoing support for pet theft reform. You've been supporting since 2018. So we're ever so grateful for every time that you say something about the campaign, because it does make such a difference. And that's one of the things. Pet theft reform is about, it's been driven by the kindness of strangers. And that's what I really like about it, is about bringing people together who all love their pets. And that sort of positive approach is something which, that in itself is a really good thing, I think. So keep working together and we'll get this change.
Thank you so much for being my guest. And that's it, everybody. What a great podcast this is. I hope you have got a lot of great information that you can use to protect your pet. We'll be back next week. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Victoria Stilwell's Positively podcast. For Victoria's online dog training courses, more information, and helpful dog training tips, visit Victoria's official website at positively.com. Get connected on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media as Victoria Stilwell, and follow her on Twitter at Victoria S. Learn to become a professional dog trainer with the Victoria Stilwell Academy at vsdogtrainingacademy.com. And be sure to tune in next time as Victoria helps you and your dog live your best life together, positively.